At the Chiao family's villa, Xiaoxi put her identity card and household register into her backpack. Finally, she glanced at the empty attic before turning to leave. "Sister, must you register your marriage with Brother Ling?" Xiaoro stood at the door, her delicate face full of sorrow. She pulled Xiaoxi's arm and begged softly, "Sister, the Gu family is a big family with strict rules. You just came back from the countryside and don't know anything. Brother Ling doesn't like you, so you won't be happy if you marry him." Xiaoxi instinctively stopped walking. She was only marrying Gu Moling for the sake of fulfilling grandfather's wish. As for whether she would be happy or not, Xiaoxi had never considered it. Before she could say anything, she heard Xiaoro scream in shock. Her frail body slammed against the metal gate with a bang. She reflexively held her stomach and looked up in disbelief. "Sister, why did you? I know you're jealous of my relationship with Brother Ling, but you're about to marry him. I won't go near Brother Ling anymore. What I said just now was to remind you that the Gu family isn't that easy to enter. You didn't need to get angry and attack me." A distance away, Gu Moling ran over. After helping Xiaoro up with heartache in his eyes, he slapped Xiaoxi without asking any questions. B*TCH. "You actually dared to push Ro? Who gave you the guts?" His slap was too forceful and 5 red finger marks instantly appeared on Xiaoxi's fair cheeks. The sharp pain penetrated her mind and awakened Xiaoxi's senses that had yet to recover. "I didn't push her." No one listened to Xiaoxi's explanation. Mr. Xiao, who came out as well, knew that Xiaoxi wanted to get a marriage certificate with Gu Moling. He barked out, "What marriage certificate? Moling and Ro are childhood sweethearts and they share a good relationship with each other. As the elder sister, what reason do you have to snatch your younger sister's boyfriend? Moreover, the Gu family has high requirements. You, a country bumpkin, will only bring shame to our Chia family if you marry into their family. We've already decided that Ro will take your place in marrying into the Gu family." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and gestured for the servants to bring Xiaoxi into the villa so that she would not continue embarrassing herself at the entrance any longer. "You're letting her take my place?" Xiaoxi took a step back to avoid the servant's outstretched hands and her gaze landed on Mr. Xiaoro, and Gu Moling. The corners of her mouth were slightly raised. "So all of you had planned this out since a long time ago and had an ulterior motive while I was kept in the dark? In the end, I was played by all of you." Mr. Xiao was dissatisfied with her attitude. "What are you talking about? Ro was raised and educated by the family since she was young. She has a noble character and an elegant temperament. She's known as a genius young lady in Li City. How can a country bumpkin like you compare to her? We brought you back from the remote countryside to let you enjoy a life of luxury that you otherwise would never have been able to enjoy. What else are you not satisfied with?" Xiaoxi tilted her head. "Didn't you bring me back because of the shares in Grandpa's hands? Grandpa said that after she got married, she would have 65% of Chiao Corporation's shares and become the largest shareholder of Chiao Corporation. Let me guess, not only do you not want me to marry Gu Moling, but you also want me to never marry anyone in my life. That way, I'll forever be under your control, right?" Mr. Xiao's expression changed slightly. Gu Moling lowered his head, seemingly deep in thought. He thought that getting 65% of Chiao Corporation's shares by marrying Xiaoxi was just a rumor. Xiaoro had been staring at Gu Moling's expression. When she saw that he was deep in thought, her heart tightened. Suddenly, she cried out in surprise and held her stomach. "It hurts. My stomach hurts." A pool of blood slowly spread from her lower body. Xiaoro panicked when she saw the blood. She grabbed Gu Moling's shirt and begged, "Brother Moling, save me, save our child." When the word child sounded, everyone was stunned. Xiaoro said in a sobbing tone, "I'm sorry, Brother Ling, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hide it from you, but my sister wanted to marry you. I didn't want to hurt my sister. I just wanted to give birth to the child alone. At the very least, the child could be a token to remember our years of relationship." Hearing Xiaoro's words, Gu Moling's heart ached even more. He bent down and pulled Xiaoro into his arms. "Why are you so silly? Our relationship has lasted for so many years and can't be destroyed by some marriage contract. Besides, even though you treat a certain someone as your sister, she has never done the same." Gu Moling's sharp gaze landed on Xiaoxi as he threatened her sinisterly. "You'd better hope that the child in Ro's stomach is fine. Otherwise, I'll make you regret coming into this world." After he carried Xiaoro and left, Mr. Xiao came back to his senses and hurriedly chased after her. This farce ended so abruptly. The sun was scorching in the sky. Xiaoxi stood at the entrance and pondered for a while before leaving. Xiaoxi leaned against a large tree at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau and surveyed the people entering and exiting with narrowed eyes. She needed to pick a marriage partner among these people. Mr. Qiao's wishful thinking was to snatch the Chiao Corporation's shares through her marriage. How could she let him have his wish? Not far away, Guzheng was leaning against the front of the car, looking at his wrist from time to time. Even though there was no expression on his handsome face, one could still sense that he was extremely unhappy. The driver kept wiping his sweat. Young master, we just received news that the Meng family is trying their best to find Miss Meng. You might have to wait a little longer. I've been waiting for 20 minutes. Ji Yuzheng lowered his head and adjusted his watch. His tone was calm and emotionless when he said, "Tell the Meng family not to look for her anymore. We'll cancel the marriage." He did not have a hobby of forcing people. Since Miss Meng did not want to marry him, he would not marry her. The chauffeur hesitated. But the old chairman was looking forward to getting Guzheng married as soon as possible. They thought that the marriage was set in stone, but Miss Meng still managed to escape in the end. "Hello, I'm sorry for interrupting. Did your arranged marriage partner run away?" Xiaoxi had observed them for a long time before deciding to go up and test them out. She smiled lightly at Guzheng. "It just so happens that my fiancé has escaped as well. Since we've both been left behind, should we get married?" Guzheng raised his head upon hearing that the woman in front of him was carrying a canvas bag. Her legs were straight and slender under her wide sweater. Her long black hair was casually tied up behind her head. Her facial features were exquisite, and her skin was fair. She was eye-catching. "Huh?" Guzheng raised his hand to stop the chauffeur who was about to speak. He said playfully, "I don't even know you. Why should I marry you?" Xiaoxi touched the tip of her nose. "If you marry me, you can get 65% of Qiao Corporation's shares. Is this reason enough?" Guzheng raised an eyebrow. Xiaoxi pointed at the chauffeur at the side and said, "I just heard the conversation between you and him. I know that you're being forced to marry by your family. As long as you marry me, not only will you be able to give your family what they want, but you'll also be able to obtain 65% of Qiao Corporation's shares. It's like killing two birds with one stone." Perhaps she was afraid that Guzheng would not believe him, so Xiaoxi opened the share transfer document and showed it to him. Qiao Corporation's, a name appeared in Guzheng's mind. "You're Xiaoxi." Xiaoxi was surprised. "You know me." Guzheng shook his head. He did not know Xiaoxi, but he could not stop the people around him from gossiping. They said that the eldest daughter of the Qiao family who was brought back from the countryside was weak and sick. Her survival relied on medications. They also said that she would take advantage of her status as the eldest daughter to boss around 10 servants. She was said to be brainless and vulgar. However, from the looks of it, the rumors could not be trusted. Actually, before Guzheng appeared, Xiaoxi had also tried to approach a few people, but they all treated her as a lunatic after listening to her. There was even one who wanted to call the police, saying that she was a scammer. Perhaps because she was used to being rejected, so after waiting for a moment and not getting a response, she intended to look for someone else. However, before she could even lift her foot, her arm was grabbed. "Where are you going? Since you don't agree, I'll go look for someone else." Guzheng was amused. "There's no need to look for anyone else." "I agree." Ignoring his chauffeur's shocked expression, Guzheng walked toward the Civil Affairs Bureau. "Did you bring your identity card and household register?" Xiaoxi reacted and took the initiative to follow behind Guzheng. "I did." She paused for a moment before adding, "Thank you. Don't worry. After we get the certificate, I'll transfer the shares to you. I won't let you suffer." Guzheng smiled but said nothing. 20 minutes later, Xiaoxi and Guzheng came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau with a red booklet in their hands. The chauffeur's expression completely collapsed. "Where are you going?" "I'll get the chauffeur to send you there." Guzheng tilted his head and looked at Xiaoxi, who had been playing with her phone with her head lowered. Xiaoxi did not even raise her head. "To your house." She had originally planned to go to Gu Moling's house after registering her marriage with him today, so she had already packed all her belongings in the Qiao family's villa. Although she had changed her marriage candidate, her plans had not changed. Guzheng raised an eyebrow. "To his house?" He looked down at the little red booklet in her hands. It seemed to make sense. The chauffeur went into the driver's seat. He still could not accept the fact that his young master had gotten married to a strange woman. Xiaoxi noticed the driver's expression and seemed to ask Guzheng with her eyes, "Is your driver reliable?" She did not want to get into an accident right after getting her marriage certificate. Guzheng coughed lightly and reminded the chauffeur to drive properly. After Xiaoxi confirmed the issue regarding her safety, she turned her attention to her phone again. The entire journey was silent. Then, Xiaoxi's phone rang. "What's the matter?" Xiaoxi's voice was cold and indifferent. "What's with your attitude?" "I'm your father." There was a faint voice coming from the other side of the phone. The person seemed to be saying that Xiaoxi was indeed from the countryside and had no manners. The person who said that was Su Mei, Xiaoxi's stepmother and Qiao Rou's biological mother. 20 years ago, less than a week after Xiaoxi's mother died, Mr. Qiao married Su Mei. What was worth mentioning was that before Su Mei joined the family, she had already given birth to Qiaoro. Mr. Qiao had claimed that Qiaoro was his biological daughter. Qiaoxi was 3 years old then while Qiaoro was only 2 months younger than her. In other words, Mr. Qiao had an affair with Su Mei when Qiaoxi's mother was pregnant with her. The first thing Su Mei did after joining the family was throw the insensible Qiaoxi to the countryside to fend for herself. Since Qiaoxi had what they wanted, she ended up returning to the Qiao family. Su Mei pretended to take good care of her and was very careful around her as well. However, now that Qiaoxi had caused Qiaoro to miscarry, everything was brought back out into the open again. Qiaoxi, ever since you returned to the Qiao family, I've been looking for a doctor to treat your illness. We're spending a fortune on all kinds of tonics and medications. You wanted to stay in a big room, so I gave you the entire 4th floor. You didn't know anything when you came back to the countryside, so I spent money to get a teacher to teach you. I was considerate toward you in every way as I was afraid that you wouldn't get used to it at all. But what about you? Su Mei questioned her at the top of her voice. You stole my daughter's fiancé and caused her to miscarry. How can there be such a vicious woman like you in this world? I've been so sincere to you, yet this is what I got. Qiaoxi, you'll die a horrible death. Guzheng, who was resting with his eyes closed, was awakened by a chuckle. He turned his head to look at Qiaoxi. The sun was blazing in the afternoon, and scorching rays of light shone on Qiaoxi's body through the car window. It was clearly a very warm scene, yet an indescribable coldness spread within the car. Qiaoxi moved her stiff neck, then relaxed her body and leaned carefree on the back seat. I stole your daughter's fiancé? Madam Su, forgive me for reminding you, but I'm the legitimate eldest daughter of the Qiao family. The fiancé you're talking about is my fiancé. It was your daughter who shamelessly became the third party and stole my fiancé. Back then, you snatched my father from my mother. Now that your daughter has snatched my fiancé away, shouldn't I say that the apple certainly doesn't fall far from the tree? Madam Su, let me kindly remind you that there's a price to pay for stealing someone else's things. I'll take back everything that you stole from my mother and what your daughter stole from me. Be prepared. Su Mei did not seem to expect such a reaction from Qiaoxi and did not say anything for a long time. The phone returned to Mr. Qiao's hand. Qiaoxi, I'll give you 20 minutes. Come to the hospital and apologize to Ro Ro immediately. You've caused Ro Ro to have a miscarriage. As long as you kneel down and apologize to Ro Ro sincerely, I won't hold you responsible. I'll also plead with Moling for you and ask him to let you off. He spoke with a strong sense of righteousness. It sounded like he was thinking for Qiaoxi's sake, but in reality, he was trampling on Qiaoxi's dignity to the ground. Mr. Qiao, on the account that you're my father, I'll tell you that I got married 10 minutes ago. You should get ready to give up your position as CEO of Qiao Corporation. Without waiting for Mr. Qiao's reaction, Qiaoxi hung up the phone. Qiaoxi was not as calm as she looked after having a falling out with her biological father. It could only be said that this family was too good at pretending. Right after Qiaoxi returned to the Qiao family, they were kind and friendly to her, causing her to mistakenly think that she could marry in peace and fulfill her grandfather's wish. Their kindness might have seemed like sweet honey, but it was worse than arsenic. If she were not careful, they would have come after her life. Qiaoxi took out a mint candy from her bag and popped it into her mouth. The bitter and cold taste spread in her mouth, suppressing all the emotions that were in her mind. Gu Zheng's gaze was still on Qiaoxi, carefully capturing every single change in her expression. His gaze was extremely invasive, making it difficult to ignore. Qiaoxi turned her head to meet his gaze and asked, "What's the matter?" Gu Zheng pointed at her phone and said, "You seem to have caused a lot of trouble." Of course, this so-called trouble was nothing to him, on the account that he and Qiaoxi had gotten their marriage certificate. If Qiaoxi asked for his help, he would not mind doing her a small favor. Unfortunately, Qiaoxi did not understand the hidden meaning behind Gu Zheng's words at all. "Don't worry, you'll still get the shares that I promised you, but it'll take some time. It'll be done after I handle the Qiao family's matter." Transferring the shares to Gu Zheng now was equivalent to transferring the Qiao family's power to him. Gu Zheng agreeing to marry her was already a great help. Qiaoxi could not repay his kindness with ingratitude. Hearing her words, Gu Zheng was silent for a long time. Finally, he could not help but ask, "You don't seem to know who I am." After Gu Zheng's reminder, Qiaoxi finally remembered that she still did not know the name of her husband. She wanted to ask Gu Zheng directly, but Gu Zheng shot her a look and just told her to look at the marriage certificate. Qiaoxi, she pushed the mint candy in her mouth to her cheeks. Her right cheek was slightly bulging out from this. At the same time, She reached into her bag to fish out the marriage certificate that she had stuffed somewhere. When she felt it, she said, "Actually, no matter who you are, after I settle the Chia family's matter and transfer the shares to you, we can." Before she could finish her words, something hard and warm was pressed onto her lips, blocking her words. Xiaoxi, Guzheng. The accident happened in an instant. Guzheng swore that it was just because he found it strange when he saw the little bump on Xiaoxi's cheek, so he could not help but want to poke it with his finger. Unexpectedly, Xiaoxi suddenly turned her head at this moment, causing his finger to directly press onto her lips. The warm and soft touch made Guzheng's heart tingle. He quickly retracted his finger and rubbed his knee as if he wanted to rub away that tingling feeling. When the tingling gradually dissipated, Guzheng frowned as he recalled what Xiaoxi had just said. He was just about to speak when he heard an excited female voice. "Sweet, your fingers are sweet." He abruptly turned his head and met Xiaoxi's sparkling eyes. Her pink tongue was licking her lips. If Guzheng's eyes were not wrong, the spot she licked was exactly where he had just touched. Guzheng's body stiffened instantly. What are you talking about? Your finger is sweet." During this time, the impression Xiaoxi gave Guzheng was that she was calm and collected. After all, no ordinary woman would dare to so boldly ask a stranger if he wanted to marry her in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau. And no ordinary woman could resist the coercion of her father and stepmother with a strong attitude. At this moment, however, the woman whom he thought was calm and composed was like a primary school student that had received a reward. Her eyes were bright like stars and filled with a pleasant surprise. A long time ago, Xiaoxi had contracted a strange disease. All the food tasted the same, bitter. Sugar was bitter, rice was bitter, and even water was bitter. Now, Guzheng's fingertip actually tasted sweet to her. She swore that it was sweet. If it were not for the fact that she was not familiar with Guzheng, Xiaoxi really wanted to lick the tip of Guzheng's finger again to confirm that she was not wrong. Her gaze lingered on his fingertips. Her reluctant look gave Guzheng a strange feeling. She looked like a dog that was eyeing a bone. Guzheng coughed lightly, trying to break the strange atmosphere. "What did you want to say to me just now?" What should she say? Of course, she wanted to say that they would get a divorce after. The sweetness between her lips and teeth dissipated, while the familiar bitterness spread throughout her mouth again. Xiaoxi bit the mint candy in her mouth as she flipped through the marriage certificate. Whether it was the man in front of her or Gu Moling, she did not really want to marry them. She had already prepared herself for a fake marriage. However, the situation was different now. She glanced at the man's name on the marriage certificate. Guzheng? That was a good name. Wait, Xiaoxi suddenly thought of something and abruptly raised her head. With her good eyesight, she could clearly see the name of the neighborhood ahead. Longwan Residential. It was a villa area in Li City, and a house here could not be bought with just money. The people living here were either extremely rich and wealthy. Her movements were so large that it was hard for Guzheng not to notice. He curled his lips and leaned back, repeating his question mischievously. "Miss Qiao, what did you want to say just now? What will we do after you transfer the shares to me?" Retracting his gaze, Xiaoxi frowned deeply. "Guzheng? The same Guzheng from Li City's Gu family?" Gu Moling's uncle. Guzheng grunted. "Xiaoxi, what the heck?" Guzheng was the youngest son of the Gu family, and the current patriarch of the Gu family. He had a wicked personality and was very unpredictable. From what Xiaoxi knew about him, he was someone who was absolutely not to be provoked. If she had not tasted sweetness from Guzheng's finger, she could tell him without hesitation that after the shares were transferred to him, the two of them would divorce and she would stay far away from him afterward. However, Guzheng's finger was sweet. If they were not tied together by marriage, it would be difficult for Xiaoxi to come into contact with Guzheng again, hence, they could not divorce. No divorce. Taking a deep breath, Xiaoxi let herself relax in the back seat of the car and waved her hand weakly. "After the shares are transferred to you, we can happily spend the money. Are you happy about it, Guzheng?" Guzheng's identity had indeed exceeded Xiaoxi's expectations. She had just arrived in Li City not long ago. Although she knew that the people in Liqing could not be provoked, she never thought that the man she chanced upon would have such an identity, which resulted in a big blunder. After a short period of silence, Xiaoxi composed herself and pressed on her phone a few times. The matter regarding Qiaorou's miscarriage would not end just because she said a few harsh words. The Qiao family would still take action in the future. And Xiaoxi smirked. She did not believe that Qiaorou was really pregnant. The children of the Gu family were worth much more than the shares of Qiao Corporation. Qiaorou, Who was such a calculative woman, definitely understood this. Xiaoxi was busy with her own matters, and Gu Zheng was not an idle person either. The two of them silently sat in the back seat and dealt with their own matters. The chauffeur quietly observed through the rearview mirror and realized that even though they were strangers, they surprisingly made quite a good match. The chauffeur shook his head in amusement. He was actually thinking that this bold woman was compatible with his young master? He must be crazy. The journey was silent as the car steadily drove into the underground garage. Xiaoxi yawned, picked up her bag, and slowly followed behind Gu Zheng after getting down from the car. She was thinking about how she could taste Gu Zheng's fingertip again. Ding! The fingerprint lock opened, but Gu Zheng did not enter. He raised his chin at Xiaoxi. Xiaoxi, Gu Zheng said, record your fingerprint. Oh, after entering, Gu Zheng brought Xiaoxi along to briefly tour around the villa. Xiaoxi's mind was elsewhere the entire time, and it was unknown what she was thinking. Gu Zheng laughed in anger. Sweeping a glance at the obviously absent-minded Xiaoxi, Gu Zheng turned around and brought her up to the third floor. Compared to the first and second floors, the third floor was more spacious and bright. Other than the gym, there was only one room on the third floor. Just then, Gu Zheng suddenly asked, "How about you stay in this room?" Xiaoxi roughly swept her gaze over it. The room was very large, and there was also a balcony. The black and gray decorations did not seem depressing, it just gave others an imposing feeling. However, there was a man's jacket on the chair in the room, a man's watch on the bedside table, and a finance book on the table not far away. "This is your room? I'm staying with you." "Why? You're not willing? Don't forget that we've already registered our marriage. How can newlyweds sleep in separate rooms?" Xiaoxi was stunned for a second. Immediately after, she suddenly grabbed Gu Zheng's hand and brought it to her mouth. Gu Zheng was shocked by her actions and reflexively wanted to withdraw his hand. Xiaoxi suddenly looked up and said, "Why are you hiding? Isn't it normal for newlyweds to kiss?" This whole time, she had been thinking about how she could taste Gu Zheng's fingers again. She forgot that they had already registered their marriage, which meant she could touch him openly. Before Gu Zheng could answer, Xiaoxi had already stretched out the tip of her tongue to lick his fingertip. Naturally, one's tongue was different from one's lips. The touch of a pair of lips was warm and soft, while the touch of a tongue was moist. The instant Xiaoxi's tongue touched his fingertip, Gu Zheng's entire body went numb. At that instant, it was as if an electric current had burst out from the point of contact between the tip of her tongue and his fingertip. It went all the way to the top of his head and spread all over his body. Xiaoxi was now sure that Gu Zheng's fingertip was really sweet. She held Gu Zheng's hand and kept caressing it. She did not have much of an expression on her face, but her clear eyes were shockingly bright. One look and one could tell that she was in a very good mood. She was indeed in a good mood, but Gu Zheng was in a terrible mood. He had only suggested Xiaoxi stay in the same room with him to tease her, yet in the end, his plan backfired on him. Gu Zheng pulled his hand back with a little force and told her to do as she pleased before rushing downstairs. Xiaoxi leaned against the railing and watched him enter the study on the second floor with dissatisfied eyes before retracting her gaze and entering the master bedroom. It was unknown whether it was because he was busy with work or he wanted to avoid Xiaoxi. Gu Zheng stayed in the study the entire afternoon. At 5 in the evening, Xiaoxi rubbed her growling stomach and walked downstairs. At the same time, the villa's door opened from the outside with a beep. A middle-aged woman with a graceful figure wearing a black suit walked in. She was about 3 meters away from Xiaoxi. She scrutinized Xiaoxi from head to toe. Then, she raised her chin and said disdainfully, "Although I don't know how you got into this villa, I'll give you 3 seconds to get out. Don't make me repeat myself." How many times had she been threatened by now? Xiaoxi silently wondered if she looked as though she was easy to bully. When the middle-aged woman appeared, the maids in the villa hesitated to go forward. When the middle-aged woman noticed them, she glared at them and ordered sternly, "What are you standing there for? You don't even care if a strange woman has barged into the villa? Why is young master even paying you?" Then, a servant went forward with some hesitation. "Housekeeper Lu, it's not that we don't care, but young master was the one who brought this woman back." "Young master said she's the young madam." "Young madam," Lu Lin laughed sarcastically. "How is she the young madam? I order you to throw this woman out." 3 years ago, there was a crazy woman who broke into the villa when they were not paying attention and tried to do something to Gu Zheng. After that, the security system of this villa was upgraded and outsiders could not break in at all. Xiaoxi looked at the woman thoughtfully. "If I'm not wrong, this villa should be using the 3rd generation Skynet security system. The security here is comparable to that of the Pentagon. The possibility of outsiders breaking in is almost zero. All of you have been recorded into the facial recognition system to ensure that you can enter and exit freely, but that's all. You don't have the authority to bring others in." The 3rd generation Skynet security system had been upgraded twice. Only one person could control the system. In other words, apart from Guzheng, no one else had the authority to bring strangers into the villa. Rubbing her stomach, Qiaoxi went to the table and poured herself a glass of water. I can sense that you're hostile toward me. Although I don't know why, I can make a few simple, logical deductions. Your attitude and how you treat the servants prove that you hold a high position in this villa. At the same time, you've been enjoying everything that you have now. When a person has a lot of things, they'll naturally become greedy. There has never been a mistress. You, the housekeeper, have been in charge of everything, including the flowers in the vase of the dining room today, the incense burning in the study, dinner, and so on. Thinking of yourself as the mistress, you enjoy the feeling of everyone listening to your orders and being in command of everything, because you know very well that it's impossible for strangers to enter this villa without Guzheng's permission. You felt threatened the moment you saw me and couldn't wait to expel me from your territory, right? From the moment she entered the villa, Qiaoxi had a strange feeling. The entire villa had been decorated too deliberately. Other than Guzheng's room, all the other spaces were like display walls, secretly and obscurely displaying someone's possessiveness. At first, she thought that it was Guzheng's strange hobby. However, after seeing Lu Lin, everything became clear. No, you're talking nonsense. Lu Lin looked ferocious as the truth had been exposed. You eloquent woman, watch how I tear your mouth off. Her sharp nails suddenly clawed at Qiaoxi's face. TSK. Qiaoxi raised her eyebrows. She was careless when Gu Moling slapped her earlier. If she was slapped by Lu Lin this time, where would she put her dignity? When Lu Lin's palm was about to land on Qiaoxi's face, no one saw Qiaoxi's movements clearly, but they saw a shadow flash past. The next moment, a muffled groan sounded in the air. After taking another look, it seemed that Qiaoxi had already twisted Lu Lin's arm behind her back, forcing her to kneel on the floor. Qiaoxi controlled Lu Lin with one hand and said expressionlessly, "Don't hit people in the face. Didn't your mother teach you?" At the same time, deep laughter came from the second floor. Rumor has it that Miss Chia's body is weak to the extent that you'd fall when the wind blew. It seems that rumors can't be trusted. You said it yourself that they're rumors. Qiaoxi looked up and met Guzheng's eyes. Young master, save me. Lu Lin screamed desperately when she saw Guzheng, taking him as her savior. Guzheng chuckled. Save you? No way. How could a housekeeper be more important than his legally married wife? Guzheng waved his hand and signaled the servants to take Lu Lin away. After Lu Lin was dragged away, Guzheng glanced at the cup of water in Qiaoxi's hand and asked, "What are you doing downstairs?" "I'm hungry." Qiaoxi narrowed her eyes as her gaze swept past Guzheng's finger. She suddenly asked, "Do you want a kiss?" She had clearly said the most intimate and embarrassing words. Yet Qiaoxi's expression did not change in the slightest. Her eyes made others vaguely perceive. Guzheng stared at her for a long time. A malicious smile gradually blossomed on his handsome face. "No rush. We have plenty of time." When he finished speaking, Qiaoxi did not react. However, the servants all had strange expressions on their faces, while a few of the younger ones were even blushing. Glancing at the clock on the wall, Guzheng said, "I'll get the kitchen to prepare dinner now. Do you have any foods that you don't like?" Qiaoxi shook her head. Everything she ate was bitter, so she had no concerns about this. Guzheng nodded. "You'll be easy to feed." Then, Guzheng had a good-looking face. Below his thick and dark brows was a pair of amorous peach blossom eyes. When he squinted, he made others see a trace of affection. It was a pity that although he had good looks, he had a nasty mouth. The words he said were always unpleasant. Qiaoxi rolled her eyes. She did not ask Guzheng if he was easy to take care of and directly walked toward the dining room. 10 minutes later, exquisite dishes were served one after another. Qiaoxi took a bite. It was still the familiar bitter taste. Opposite her, Guzheng's well-defined fingers were holding onto the chopsticks. His hands were comparable to a work of art. Sensing that Qiaoxi's gaze had been lingering on his hand, Guzheng asked without even raising his head, "Does looking at my hand increase your appetite?" Qiaoxi said righteously, "I can't just look at it. I have to kiss it." Guzheng, he had underestimated how shameless this woman was. Pulling out a napkin, Guzheng slowly wiped his mouth with it. "I'm very curious. Are you so rash with everyone?" Even though they had registered their marriage and were legally a married couple, it was still a fact that they only had their first meeting today. Of course not. After all, in all these years, Qiaoxi had never met someone like Guzheng who could make her taste something sweet. "You're very special." This was Qiaoxi's evaluation of Guzheng. Special? Guzheng raised his eyebrows with a smile, his handsome face like a spring breeze. Is this a confession in disguise? Confession? With all the knowledge that Qiaoxi had learned in the past 23 years, she was unable to analyze how Guzheng connected the word special to a confession. She shook her head. "I'm not confessing. I just like your hands. She made no attempt to hide her desire. She had tasted too many bitter things, so being able to taste something sweet was extremely tempting to her. Qiaoshi even had the evil thought of cutting off Gu Zheng's finger and taking it away. Like his hands? Could it be that she had a hand fetish? Gu Zheng was deep in thought. After dinner, Qiaoshi got up and walked to the third floor. As she did not turn around, she did not see Gu Zheng's speechless expression. Was this woman really going to share a room with him? In the bedroom on the third floor, the phone that she had casually tossed onto the coffee table earlier was ringing. Qiaoshi picked it up and looked at the caller ID before walking toward the balcony. The moment the call connected, Gu Moling's impatient and vicious voice was heard. Qiaoshi, are you dead? Why haven't you been answering my calls? Without waiting for Qiaoshi's reply, he continued, although I can't wait for you to quickly die and be buried with my unborn son, I don't want you to die so easily. I want to torture you and have you experience a life worse than death. I want you to know the consequences of provoking the Gu family and killing the children of the Gu family. What do you want to do to me? Tell me. Qiaoshi's voice was calm, but in Gu Moling's ears, it was filled with provocation. He threatened sinisterly, don't you want Qiao Corporation's shares? Believe me when I say that I won't let you take a single cent. Life in the countryside wasn't easy, right? Especially for you since you've experienced the life of a rich person. Would you still be able to adapt if I threw you back into the countryside? Would you shake your head and beg me like a dog to let you live? Qiaoshi thought for a moment and replied with certainty, no, life in the countryside back then was much better than it was now. She was too stubborn. Gu Moling choked, not knowing what to say. Qiaoshi asked indifferently, so you called me just for this nonsense? Of course not. Gu Moling came back to his senses. He took a deep breath and returned to the main topic. The incident between you and Ro Ro that took place at the entrance of the villa this morning was photographed by passers-by. They've been uploaded onto the internet. Everyone is saying that Ro Ro is a pretentious B*TCH. The Gu and Qiao family stock prices have also dropped quite a bit. You need to step forward and explain that you were insensible and wanted to marry me by force. Ro Ro is the victim here. Everything she did was to protect you from harm. Protect her? Qiaoshi could not help but laugh. How did Qiao Ro protect me? Could it be that she knew in advance that you're a scumbag, so she didn't hesitate to risk her life to seduce you to let me see your true colors? Gu Moling, even if you twist the facts, it's undeniable no one is as wicked and crooked as you. Do you think I'm a fool? What do you mean a fool? Qiaoshi, don't be so harsh with your words. Gu Moling frowned. You're from the Qiao family. What's wrong with you helping out when something happens to the Qiao family? I only asked you to say a few words. It's not like I'm asking you to lose weight. What's there to be unhappy about? I'm indeed from the Qiao family, but not that Qiao family. Qiaoshi leaned against the railing of the balcony and lowered her eyes to stare at the lawn lights in the courtyard. There was not the slightest expression on her fair face. From the beginning till the end, I never owed Qiao Ro anything. Her mother killed my mother and she occupied my position as the Qiao family's eldest young miss. I'll take revenge for all this bit by bit. They have to spit out everything that doesn't belong to them. Qiaoshi, have you gone mad? Hasn't Ro Ro done enough? She even wanted to give me to you. Gu Moling did not understand how Qiaoshi seemingly became like this overnight. His tone was full of disappointment. People from the countryside are just insensible. No matter what Ro Ro and the others have done, it doesn't change that you're an ingrate. Someone like you isn't worthy of marrying into the Gu family. He was extremely glad that he had not agreed to marry Qiaoshi because of the 65% shares. Marrying such a woman would not only be of no help to him, but she would also drag him down. Not fit to marry into the Gu family? Ah. Qiaoshi suddenly recalled that she had already married into the Gu family, and the person she married was the head of the Gu family, Gu Moling's uncle. It's not up to you to decide whether I'm worthy or not. Qiaoshi smiled meaningfully. She was looking forward to Gu Moling's expression when he saw her in the Gu family. With that, she did not give Gu Moling any chance to continue speaking and hung up. The next morning, Qiaoshi opened her eyes to look at the unfamiliar ceiling and suddenly recalled that she was already married. However, what about Gu Zheng? He did not come back to the master bedroom last night. After washing up, she went downstairs and happened to see the door of the guest room on the second floor open. Gu Zheng walked out wearing a gray set of loungewear. He was tall and had long legs. His peach blossom eyes were slightly narrowed, making him look carefree. Qiaoshi sized up Gu Zheng from head to toe. You slept there? Why? What other reason could it be? Of course, it was because she occupied the master bedroom. Gu Zheng rolled his eyes silently. Are you shy? Qiaoshi was very understanding as she tried to enlighten him. Actually, there's nothing to be shy about. We've already registered our marriage, so we'll have to sleep on the same bed sooner or later. Gu Zheng stopped in his tracks. You really want to sleep with me? He remembered Xiaoxi's burning gaze when she stared at his hand. He remembered that she would kiss his fingertip every now and then. In conclusion, did this woman desire his body? Actually, we don't have to sleep together, but you have to let me kiss your fingers from time to time. Imagining herself sleeping on the same bed as Gu Zheng, Xiaoxi fell silent and changed her mind. She targeted Gu Zheng's fingers. Her words made Gu Zheng even more certain that this woman desired his body. If I remember correctly, you wanted to divorce me yesterday, right? After transferring the shares to me, we can get a divorce. That's what you wanted to tell me. Gu Zheng was 2 heads taller than Xiaoxi. With his hands in his pockets, his tall body slowly approached Xiaoxi as he gave off an enormous amount of pressure. The reason he agreed to Xiaoxi's proposal at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau was mainly to deal with his father. Secondly, he had discerned that Xiaoxi did not really want to marry him. She was mostly thinking of cooperating with him. Hence their marriage was for mutual benefits. All this was aligned to Gu Zheng's expectations of this marriage as well. Now, Xiaoxi's attitude had changed. She actually dared to lust after his body. This was absolutely intolerable. During this period they were together. It had always been Xiaoxi who took the initiative. Now that Gu Zheng was suddenly approaching her first, it caused Xiaoxi to be unable to adapt for a moment. However, she quickly gathered herself. I admit that I did have plans to divorce you at the start, but there was an incident later. We can talk about divorce later. Xiaoxi took out her phone and opened the transfer contract that she had drafted last night. In order to compensate you, I can transfer the shares of Qiao Corporation to you in advance. After a pause, she added, other than that, I can promise you 3 things even though I don't usually make promises. Gu Zheng, what could I possibly be lacking? With his status and identity, what could he ask of Xiaoxi, this young miss who had returned from the countryside? Should he ask her for help in farming? Xiaoxi shrugged. Anything's fine. Gu Zheng's thin lips curled up slightly. He was about to open his mouth to retort when Xiaoxi's phone rang. Hold on, let me take this call first. Xiaoxi took a step back to distance herself from Gu Zheng before taking out her phone to answer the call. Gu Zheng observed her small actions and could not help but let out a soft chuckle. The voice on the other end of the phone immediately sounded as Mr. Xiao shouted in exasperation. Xiaoxi, where are you? The servant said that you didn't come home last night. Could it be that you went to hang out with a man? Don't you have any shame? The Qiao family's reputation has been trampled to the ground by you. Xiaoxi moved the phone farther away. When the voice on the other end gradually became softer, she reminded unhurriedly, the Qiao family's reputation was completely trampled to the ground by you 20 years ago. Also, I told you yesterday that I've gotten married. Gu Zheng looked up at her with an inexplicable expression. Xiaoxi was not in the mood to analyze Gu Zheng's micro-expressions. She continued speaking into her phone. If you're calling to say this nonsense, then please hang up. Mr. Xiao gritted his teeth and said, Xiaoxi, don't think that you can escape from me just because you're married. Come to the hospital before 3 in the afternoon and we'll talk. Bring your husband along. Mr. Xiao's voice was very loud. Even if Gu Zheng was not deliberately trying to eavesdrop, he could still hear it clearly. Gu Zheng pointed at the phone. Do you need my help? Xiaoxi shook her head. There's no need for you to make an appearance for such a small matter. She knew that Mr. Qiao did not believe that she could marry herself off within a day. Of course, she did not need him to believe her either. Putting away her phone, Xiaoxi seemed to have thought of something and raised her eyebrows at Gu Zheng. If you want to help me, why don't you help me with another matter? Gu Zheng alertly caught the change in Xiaoxi's gaze. He turned around without hesitation. Not gonna help you anymore. How petty, Xiaoxi muttered in a low voice. She had to go to the hospital later to face the Qiao family and that scumbag, Gu Moling. Hence, she wanted to recharge and taste something sweet. Hearing the muttering behind him, Gu Zheng turned around and raised his hand. He placed his slender and strong fingers on Xiaoxi's mouth. A hint of sweet taste spread from where the fingers touched. Xiaoxi's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled with extreme satisfaction. Thank you. Never again. Ji Yuzheng flung his hands and hurried down the stairs. He must be out of his mind to do what he did just now. In the hospital, Qiao lay on the bed with a pale face. Dad, Mom, Sister didn't push me on purpose. It was all my fault. Don't be angry. Why are you still speaking up for her at a time like this? Do you know what you've lost? Mr. Qiao was upset that she was not fighting back. That's a child of the Gu family, the great-grandchild of our family. Su Mei was crying at the side. My poor daughter, what sins have we committed that my daughter is suffering such a calamity? It's all Xiaoxi's fault. It's all Xiaoxi's fault. You're blaming me? I think you should blame yourself for your sins. A female voice interrupted Su Mei's complaints. Xiaoxi lazily leaned against the door of the ward and glanced at Qiaorou's pale face with a smile. Qiaorou shivered for some reason and said in a shaky voice, Sister, when did you come? Don't mind what Mom said just now. She's just too sad and spouted nonsense. I don't mean to blame you. Maybe it's because the child and I aren't blessed enough, so he had to leave me. She stroked her belly, tears streaming down her face. Those who heard her would be heartbroken and shed tears. As soon as Sumei saw Qiaoxi, she was unable to suppress the flames of rage in her heart. You still dare to come? You're the culprit who killed my grandson. I'll make you pay with your life. She raised her hand and pounced toward Qiaoxi. Qiaoxi swept her foot, and the wooden chair blocked Sumei's path. Qiaoxi's expression was cold as she said, "Don't say such nasty words to me the moment I arrive. Whether or not I killed your grandson still needs to be investigated." Xiaorou's eyes were filled with tears. She first looked at Qiaoxi accusingly, then bit her lip in a grievance. Sister is right. She wasn't the one who caused my child's death. Dad, Mom, let's just let this matter go, okay? We're a family. I hope our family can be harmonious. As long as sister is happy, I'm fine. As she spoke, she forcefully held back her tears and turned her head to the side. Actually, it's quite good that the child is gone. At least in the future, sister can be with Brother Moling without any worries. I wish sister and Brother Moling a happy marriage. What a magnanimous girl. Qiaoxi seriously admired Xiaorou's performance. With such realistic acting skills, it was no wonder that she was able to trick her into running in circles. Like a fool, Qiaoxi thought that she had been living a good life before this. Mr. Qiao was furious, but his heart ached for Xiaorou. He could only vent all his anger on Qiaoxi. Look at the difference between your sister and yourself. No wonder you came from the countryside. You're selfish to your bone. Is the marriage contract that important? So important that you don't even want your family? Your sister and Gu Moling are childhood sweethearts and have been in a relationship for so many years. Do you really have to interfere? I've made a decision. You'll let your sister marry Gu Moling as compensation. Qiaoxi shook her finger. That won't do. Qiaoxi, are you trying to force Ro to a dead end? She has already lost her child. Are you going to make her lose her lover? How can you be so vicious? Sumei broke down and shouted. On the hospital bed, Xiaorou bit her lip and cried silently. The corners of Qiaoxi's mouth curved into a mocking arc. Xiaorou, how long are you going to pretend for? Do you feel a sense of accomplishment watching your mother and father go crazy for you? Xiaorou was stunned. Sister, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Qiaoxi chuckled. Looks like you won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. Qiaoxi took out her phone and casually tapped on the screen twice. Then, a male voice that was deliberately lowered sounded. Miss Qiao, this matter isn't easy to handle. Look, if someone finds out, I won't be able to stay in the hospital anymore. I still have my wife and children to support. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not asking you to increase the payment. I just think that this matter is too risky. No, let's proceed. Xiaorou abruptly sat up on the bed and stared at Qiaoxi in horror. How did she have this recording? Qiaoxi raised her chin. Looks like you've recalled something, little sister. Mr. Qiao and Sumei were dumbfounded. Ro, you, don't ask me anything. Dad, Mom, can you go out first? I want to talk to sister alone. Sumei still wanted to say something, but when she met Xiaorou's pleading gaze, she could only fiercely warn Qiaoxi not to act recklessly. Your mother and I will just be outside. Call us if you need us. Mr. Qiao was also worried about Xiaorou and Qiaoxi being alone in the same ward, but he could not resist Xiaorou's pleading. In the end, he could only pull Sumei along and leave the ward. As the door of the ward closed, Xiaorou's aura changed. She lowered her head and played with her long hair. She pretended to ask casually, "Where did your recording come from? These people are really bad. They're deliberately trying to ruin our relationship as sisters." Qiaoxi pulled a chair over and sat down. Aren't you tired of acting? She had already fallen out with her, yet she still pretended to be close to her. Xiaorou lowered her head, and her expression could not be seen clearly. However, from her trembling shoulders, it could be seen that she was not calm at all. Sister, why did you come back? Since you already went to the countryside, why didn't you just die there? Did you come back because you want to take away my position as the Chia family's eldest daughter? Why did you snatch my fiancé? And that stubborn grandpa, why did he set such a rule? Why did he give you the shares of Chia Corporation? Why? In what way am I inferior to you? In terms of knowledge, talent, and etiquette, how am I inferior to you? You're a peasant who came back from the countryside. A peasant who doesn't even know how to put on makeup. What right do you have to snatch away all my things the moment you returned? She suddenly looked up. Her bloodshot eyes filled with unwillingness and resentment. She was angry. She hated Qiaoxi. She wished for nothing more than for Qiaoxi to die. Why? Qiaoxi looked up at the pure white ceiling and said in an extremely soft voice, Perhaps it's because everything you said rightfully belongs to me. She explained the truth calmly. If your mother hadn't interfered in my mother's marriage, I would have had a complete family. I would have grown up in Lee City and learned everything you just mentioned. And you're just a predator who stole everything that originally belonged to me. Xiaorou's body trembled, and she subconsciously retorted, no, my mother didn't interfere with your mother's marriage. It was your mother who was incapable and couldn't keep a man. Huh? This explanation, Xiaoxi was shocked by Xiaorou's worldview. She paused for a long time before speaking with slight doubt. According to what you said, I want to fulfill the marriage contract with Gu Moling and marry him. You, his childhood sweetheart, were abandoned. Is it because you lack the ability as well? Then, no, of course not. You threatened and bribed him. You and Grandpa used the shares to force Brother Moling to marry you. Oh, no matter what, you're the one who's right. Xiaoxi played with her phone. You're acting so self-righteous as a mistress. I've learned something today. She looked up at Xiaorou. Let's get back to the main topic. How does someone who isn't pregnant have a miscarriage? Xiaorou's expression froze. Then she suddenly raised her head and smiled at Xiaoxi. Sister, why are you so sure that I was never pregnant? Just because of that recording? But recordings can also be faked. She had been too shocked earlier and surprised that Xiaoxi could actually obtain that recording. Now, she had calmed down. So what if Xiaoxi had obtained the recording? As long as she insisted that the recording was fake, there was nothing Xiaoxi could do about it. Her hospitalization and surgery reports were all true. Are you lying through your teeth? Xiaoxi quickly saw through Xiaorou's plan. She had to admit that if it were someone else, Xiaorou's plan would definitely succeed. Unfortunately, she was her opponent this time. If you rely on those reports, you might lose. Xiaoxi tapped lightly on a video file on her phone, then flipped the phone screen so that Xiaorou could see the video clearly.